Most people have the wrong impression about the World Wrestling Federation. We're a non-violent form of entertainment.
Welcome back to Beyond the Beermat. Maybe one of the few things in wrestling that isn't an elaborate Chris Jericho ruse, or is it? It isn't. It definitely isn't. My name is Stuart Quigley. Alongside me is...
Holla, 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 player. I see a tag team match. It's your boy, Teddy Long. No, it's not. It's Matt. I'm joshing.
Yeah.
It wasn't Teddy Long.
I was going to say, like, everyone listening must have thought that, like, Teddy Long was actually in the room. We haven't announced that we've got some high-profile interviews, but no, that voice was very convincing. I'm sure that's exactly what Teddy Long sounds like. Oh, no, wait, the opposite of all of those things. Before we get on to the main topic of discussion for today's podcast, we're going to do something slightly different because we reached 20 episodes last time. This is episode 21, and technically if you listen to an episode a year, you'd be legal age of drinking in America. I would advise listening to an episode when it comes out, not waiting a year. It's good. It's good. Consume as much as you can when you can. What we're going to do before we start is play a little game.
Ah, wicked.
Yes.
I love games.
Indeed, yes. We're not about Triple H either.
Oh.
Or are we?
Playing with the game and playing the game are two different things.
I'd like to point out, by the way, if you're listening and you think that pun was like slightly awful and stretched, wait until you hear the name of this, because what we've got is we've each got a wrestler in mind.
Yeah.
And we're going to play a classic game of Guess Who, except it's not Guess Who, because this is Beyond the Beermat. This is Guess Woo!
Nice.
Yeah, see what I did there?
Yeah.
Fun. Yeah. We're going to have to flip a coin to see who goes first.
It's
Tails it is.
Oh, Tails never fails.
So I'm going first.
Okay.
So in classic Guess Who style, we'll have to ask questions. For an example, is it a man, is it a woman, etc. The only stipulation we said beforehand is that they have to be on the roster now, whether it be NXT or main roster, so at least now.
Okay.
We're not talking old people. So, okay, I've got mine, you got yours. First question, are they on Raw?
No. Is it a male?
No.
Okay, good.
Are they part of a tag team?
Yes. So far I know it be
A woman.
flavoured superstar. Is she on Raw?
No.
You
Are
want
they a
me?
former world champion?
No. Is she from a European country, aka not American?
No. Is their tag team currently active?
Yes.
Okay.
Is she from SmackDown?
Yes. Is it one of the Usos?
No. Is she from the Southern Hemisphere?
No.
Can I guess? Or have I blown my load? If I have one guess,
You've
am I
blown
shot my wad?
your load.
Oh, I can't do it
Because
then.
you know who it is now, don't you?
I think so.
Yeah, so I'll do mine now.
Go on then.
There's a couple more.
Go on then.
Tag team, not one of the Usos. Currently going. This is fucking ridiculous. I should be able to get this from here.
You
I've
should.
got all the pieces in front of me.
Yeah.
I can see it. Jesus Christ, this is killing me. The suspense, the tension. I might shit myself. I'm just gonna. I think I might have to waste a guess here and let it go back to you because I know you're gonna win anyway. Is it Cesaro?
Oh, motherfuck.
Yes! Talk about pulling it out of the bag right at the last second.
Bastard. When is yours Asuka?
Yes.
Oh,
I
yes.
knew. Yeah, you knew as soon as you got it. I had to talk about getting it right at the last second. I knew that I had to reach deep within the well of knowledge just to get to that point.
Whilst we're on the subject of women, though, and women's wrestling,
Yep.
I faced a dilemma, as we discussed in the earlier on, pre-recording. I've been watching this Super Showdown that's now been out for a number of weeks, and I watch wrestling in public. There's my big reveal for the episode.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I've got a rather long train journey from the middle of town to get home now, so I've got a good 20 minutes on my hand to fill that void, rather than making small talk with people I might know,
Definitely not.
or staring blankly at another
Questioning
computer.
your life now, your very existence.
Yeah, so I sit there with my head down in silence watching wrestling, and I don't know if you still feel this, but I felt embarrassment.
In what sense?
Oh,
What do you mean watching wrestling in public?
Yeah, I felt the shame and embarrassment as I'm watching Super Showdown. I'm like Braun Strowman, I can't even say it. I'm imagining someone's looking over my shoulder and seeing old man Undertaker and baldy Triple H come out and being like, I know these people, you sad fuck, you're watching wrestling. And I only had like a quantum of solace, and that was when it was the women's match. And so I took sort of a lot more satisfaction from this women's tag team triple, whatever it was, 3-man tag match. Ronda Rousey and the Bellas versus Riot Squad. Called them Absolution there. Because I thought, this looks like wrestling, and wrestling's cool. Like, ultimately, wrestling's good. It's the characters that make it a bit cringy, I think, anyway. I think maybe that's what I've realised this week. And so, as I'm watching the women's wrestling, it's like, if there's someone stood looking over my shoulder, they don't know who these people are. It's not reflective of a WWE product. It's like a new, fresh thing, but it's still wrestling, which I love. So, yeah,
So
man.
you're saying that it's potentially gone full circle in the sense of like when we were younger and you've got Attitude Era onwards and the women would come out and like if your parents walked in the room while you had the women on TV, you'd be very embarrassed.
Yeah.
It may as well be like your...
Because it was just cheap titillation, and so when you're in front of your mum and it's like, oh, you know, 2 people are about to have sex in a film, cover your eyes and start making small talk.
That's the weird thing is that like it goes to show, and we spoke about this on a previous podcast, this idea of like what women's wrestling was then to what it is now. And if you're saying it's fully done that 180, and that's where we are with this, I would say that's a good thing, but the only problem with that is that like the percentage of the show that is the women is comparatively smaller, so you've got more of what you're watching to be embarrassed about, if that's the way you're...
No, you have, definitely. I think it was alright for some of the earlier matches. I think when you've got, this sounds detrimental and it's against everything people say about the Attitude Era, but when you've got these stars from yesteryear, I think that's when it gets a bit cringy and a bit embarrassing, because it's like, because they're well known outside of the wrestling universe, because they're recognisable people. So, like for The Rock's completely different, because obviously he's got like this Hollywood movie acting career, but still for people like The Undertaker and Triple H, Triple H's had films. Blade 3.
The Chaperone.
Yeah, but for like that sort of person, or Shawn Michaels as well, they're people that are still recognisable, I think, to some extent. Shawn Michaels lesser so, because he's not like in this HBK character mode, but for The Undertaker, it's like a 60-year-old man walking out for 14 minutes in his hat and too much fog, like too much smoke machine going on. People, someone that's looking over my shoulder, seeing what I'm watching, they must be thinking, you sad fuck.
Can I posture a theory, actually, which is slightly different to the angle you're looking at, but you as the viewer haven't necessarily seen it through these lenses, right? It's not quite your fault. This is actually a WWE problem in the sense that when someone's looking at that, I don't know if they would think that you're watching current WWE. I would think that they're thinking, I mean, it depends on how big your fucking phone screen is, but I would think that if you saw like a glimpse of Triple H Undertaker, I would assume someone was watching something from the past, and then and then your brain would go from there, oh, you haven't moved on, and it's not you that haven't moved on, it's them that haven't moved on.
Yeah, I think maybe it's on me, then maybe I'm thinking too much into it because I know enough about like what I'm actually watching. So if you haven't got that point of reference, if you are an over-shoulder viewer and you're seeing that, you probably are thinking this is something from yesteryear.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking if it is something from yesteryear, as the first person actually viewing it, it's getting convoluted, but as the person that's actually watching it, I think that was cooler than seeing the same thing 20 years later.
I really don't think, as someone that doesn't watch wrestling, but knows who Triple H and The Undertaker are, for example, if you saw someone watching it, you would automatically assume that this was the most recent pay-per-view.
No, you wouldn't have thought so, would you? As a casual viewer, no chance. I don't know.
And then when you found that out, that would be the embarrassing part.
I don't know, because then it gets me onto the psyche of wrestlers as well. To admit that you're a wrestler, as someone that's stepped into the squared circle but not exactly had anything of a career, if you tell people that, I think it's like a hobby, oh, here, get over it, it's like a little phase that you're growing out of. But I sometimes think, as Triple H or The Undertaker, yes, you're in a bloody great big mansion and your bank account is on the healthy side, do you reckon they ever think, what a cringy life I've lived?
No.
To be playing this character. At the same time, though, I wouldn't do that for an actor. But it's the fact that they're play fighting at the end of it, which is...
Same with an actor, though.
Yeah, I guess so.
I think the thing is that there are moments in wrestling that you would, if you're the person involved, like any sort of time you were involved in a segment with like Hornswoggle or whatever, you may just go, oh, he's just painted a cartoon tunnel on the wall and now he's going to run into it and now I'm going to run into the wall. You might in that instance go, what am I doing with my life? So there might be one or two moments. I generally don't think that anyone, certainly in the WWE, wakes up and goes, what is this? Because fundamentally, to get to that point, you have to be so committed and so in on it yourself.
You've busted your ass your whole life, haven't you? So you've bought into it, basically. Yeah, maybe it's just me. What I'm trying to say is, I don't hate wrestling currently. What I'm trying to do as well is get away from this, which I might have been in the first sort of 15, 20 odd podcasts, where it seems like all we're doing is beating down on the Fed and hating on wrestling. Everyone fucking has a go at wrestling. Any podcast you listen to, all it is a critique of it. No one sees the positives in it anymore.
I would like to think, and I don't know this, throughout the 21 episodes that we've done, that we've not been that negative. We've tried to just decompartmentalise it. That's all we've tried to do. And then go for what it is, and then also at the same time say what it is, why, and then underneath it go, yeah, but we couldn't do it either. It's funny though, because we've enjoyed a classic inaugural edition of what will become an instant hit with the fans, Guess Who?
Woo!
And then you mentioned, obviously, just minutes ago, this idea of confusing wrestlers with actors and whatnot. So what we're talking about today is not only a classic wrestling trope, I would say a classic TV and film trope, but we've seen a lot of examples of it, and this is sort of a broad umbrella term here that I'm going to coin, which is basically just to cover my own ass, just in case any smarks get on my back and say, technically what you've said isn't what actually you talked about. So we're just looking at cliffhangers, mysteries, and the wrestling angles of who did this? Why did they do it? What a reveal this could possibly be. The things that have happened, the things that have, for one reason or another, not actually transpired. And before we get into any of this, I think it's worth pointing out, I mentioned before about like TV and films and that wrestling, because it's in a unique position in the sense of like, technically every show is a cliffhanger in a certain sense, because there's no end point. I would say there used to be certain points where you could go, this is where the storyline ends, or this is where most of the storyline ends, and that was usually WrestleMania. I would argue, and I will ask you this now as a quick aside, is there any in current modern day wrestling, because I think we don't have any, but the closest we get to as a sort of where we get our questions answered, or at least some questions answered, is the Royal Rumble. But I think the problem with that is you get more questions with that as well.
Yeah.
Every single show, every single pay-per-view, every single whatever, it's just a continuation. So the whole thing of cliffhangers and this in general is that's kind of what you're hoping for, I want to say, every week.
Everything should be a cliffhanger. What they shouldn't be doing is announcing a week in advance what match is going to happen the following week. You're ruining the surprise. Yes, it gets the anticipation. The problem is, because of the time slots and the time differences and whatever else, where the WWE have to compete with the NFL and like basketball in certain seasons, when the two do clash, you do have to make those announcements a week before.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you've got enough wrestlers, you've got enough active superstars, so that you should be able to have cliffhangers in some stories. It comes back to the old problem of the fact that you're not giving enough wrestlers storylines. You've got a roster of 200 people, you've selected 25 of them, and that's split across both shows. There must easily be 200 wrestlers or 150 wrestlers on their rosters for SmackDown and Raw put together. Easily, but you get the same 12 people on both shows, and you just rinse and repeat them over and over again. You don't give the exposure to the rest of your active roster, and so at the end of the day, the Fed have to watch their budgets, and so they can only afford to actually be paying a set amount of people to fly to a set country or a set location to go and actually put on these shows. That doesn't mean you haven't got room to actually still do these cliffhangers. Yeah. If you're announcing 3 weeks before it happens that Charlotte or Ronda Rousey's taking on Nikki Bella, you're building hype for a pay-per-view, but you've got 3 weeks of the same thing, just rinse and repeat. Ronda Rousey comes out, she slates Nikki Bella. The following week they do it again and Ronda Rousey might get a punch in. The following week they do it again, but the Bellas get the upper hand. They don't actually ever have a match, it's just a promo that's repeated over and over again, and that's why it gets boring week in, week out.
I think the thing for that is, you see it now, we live in an era where it's the golden age of television, as they call it, all these massive TV shows with massive budgets, and you get God knows what going on any given show. Like, I know we've had like Breaking Bad and Mad Men and all that, and we've moved on from that, and we've got like The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, which are huge shows.
Yeah.
And even though the ratings are like going down for one, Raw would fucking kill for those ratings.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But I think the problem you've got is, and this has always been a WWE, this has always been a wrestling thing, I'd say broadly speaking across all companies, because for wrestling, which is different, is that like you get your hardcore fans for TV shows that will watch regardless. I know I mentioned The Walking Dead not that long ago, but people watch that now out of habit rather than anything, which you want to say you would compare that to wrestling, but The Walking Dead is never going. We want to reach out to the casual fans that only watch us once or twice a week. So the problem with wrestling is that they try to do two things at once, which is have the mystery, have the cliffhangers, have the thing at the end of the show which is going to try and get you to watch next week. But also at the same time, they try and close the loop on any given show, so that if you just watch one Raw, you know the whole thing from front to back, even though I think that's not the way you should do it. You should reward the people that are watching it more regularly.
Yeah.
Because, and also as well, treat the audience with a bit of respect in terms of like, if you're not repeating 5 times in a show why these two people are fighting, just go, I expect them to be able to catch up. If you're having a one-off show, what you said, we see it on Raw all the time where two people fight, and then the next week, like you've got a tag team, on one Raw, one of the team will fight the other one, and then the next Raw, the other one will fight the other one, and then the next Raw they'll probably have like a non-title match, and then the pay-per-view they'll have a title match.
You have the payoff, don't you?
Yeah. And in theory, that's like basic 1, 2, 3, 4, but there's no intrigue, there's no real...
Yeah, but the payoff
source on
bollocks
that.
as well. That's the issue, because the payoff isn't because you've oversaturated it with too many pay-per-views in a year. Yes, you've cut it down from when you actually had the brand split and you ended up having like 2 pay-per-views a month.
Yes.
Now you're back to having 12 or 13 a month, or 15 when you include the specials and the foreign shows as well. These payoffs aren't worth shit, because you don't get the satisfaction, you don't get the payoff at the pay-per-view anymore.
No, because
you don't get a concrete resolution.
Yeah.
It was at Super Showdown, Becky Lynch versus Charlotte was supposed to be the second rematch for the women's SmackDown belt, and Becky Lynch cheated her way out of it, and so now we've got to wait another 4 weeks when they do it all over again at Evolution.
Yeah, okay, this is the problem you've got, and what I mentioned before in terms of like, when do you have these points? You used to get it at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
I think, as I mentioned, I think the Royal Rumble is the closest you can get to. We don't get definitive answers, but we get answers in terms of like, oh, okay, now we know he's going to WrestleMania.
Yeah, exactly, you get the answer of what is the build-up to WrestleMania.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Generally speaking, the answer usually prompts the question of, can we get something different? But I think also as well, in terms of trying to, I don't know, hype a pay-per-view, and you getting any sort of questions, answers, whatever from that, it's now then become, we hype the pay-per-view hypes the show, and so on and so forth. And it's supposed to be this perpetual motion machine where you're like, you go in, you watch one Raw, that leads you on to the next, to the next, to the pay-per-view, and so on and so forth. But in the end, you're like, no, I need some sort of actual satisfaction here. I need something tangible. And I think we've got a list here of quite a few of the, what you would call mysteries, cliffhangers, whatever you want to call them, angles that sort of drew people in, and whether they paid off well or terribly, or even sometimes just were dropped completely, then, you know, we'll see how that goes.
So,
okay, what you got for us then? Because we've both got a comprehensive list, so what have you got?
the biggest mystery of all, why John Cena proposed to Nikki Bella.
Oh,
that's a joke. He was browbeaten into it. Jeez. It's good for ratings, John. Make sure you do it. Well, that didn't pay off. Anyway, away from those mysteries, actual storyline mysteries. So, Vince McMahon's special red toolbox.
Oh, the lockbox.
The lockbox of doom. What's in there? Who knows? What's in there? Nobody knows. And no one shall ever know.
This is the other thing that we should mention in terms of the WWE wrestling in general, is that when you have certain TV programs and you have like something mentioned, you might not get a payoff in that particular series. You might have to wait a couple of years to get that payoff, but you get that payoff. WWE work on a reverse system of, if it wasn't mentioned within the last 6 months, it didn't happen. So that's one of these things that has just disappeared into the ether.
So, backstory on the special red lockbox, if we're going to call it that, was it Shane McMahon wanted control of Raw, but Vince McMahon wouldn't give it to him, and so Shane McMahon got out Vince McMahon's special red lockbox, which contained the secrets of the universe and all sorts of goodies.
Porn.
Like Pandora's box, basically. which cannot be opened. So Vince McMahon decided Shane McMahon should have a match in order to protect the contents of the red box so no one could ever know. And there was only one person that could defend Vince McMahon's honour, and that was The Undertaker. So Shane McMahon, Undertaker, Hell in a Cell, over the sake of a little red box, of which we never found the contents of anyway. And while Shane McMahon lost the match,
He got smacked down anyway.
He got smacked down anyway. Yeah. So he got a show. Even
the next night on Raw.
Yeah, you can have it anyway. You did such a good job against The Undertaker. So multiple questions there. One, obviously, what was in the goddamn box? No one knows, no one really cares. And more importantly, why did The Undertaker feel it necessary to defend Vince McMahon's honour and like protect the box?
There's a couple of things that are play there in terms of writing, terrible writing, which are basically, are you aware of the term Chekhov's gun?
No.
Chekhov's gun is basically a TV trope of, and I'm probably going to get the description of this wrong, where basically like in Star Trek, it was mentioned randomly that Chekhov had a gun, and then if you're going to mention it, you got to use it, and it came up at the end of the episode, and he used it.
Good. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Okay,
so,
that's fine. Yeah.
So the idea is, if you mention something randomly out of nowhere, you've got to then use it.
Yeah.
So this is a weird sort of reversal of that. The other thing is that like, if you tuned into Raw and you've never watched it before, what are you doing? Jeez. And the first episode you saw was that particular episode. That might give you some sort of sense of intrigue. You would be fucked by the end of that storyline when you get to the other side of it and Shane McMahon gets the ding. So you're pissing off people that have just watched that storyline. Secondly, you're pissing off people with any knowledge of continuity, full stop. Because The Undertaker would not defend Vince McMahon's honour, that's the problem. Yeah. And what you're doing is you're literally throwing characters against the wall, and you've got, you know that thing where you've got string to like, from one to the other, and you're trying to like, the detective thing, trying to put it together.
Link them together, yeah.
That's literally what they did. They just went, like a random machine. Undertaker, Shane McMahon, Hell in a Cell. How do we get to that? I don't know, just tie a piece of string and we'll find a way.
Little red box. Little red box to the rescue. So yeah, that was complete bollocks anyway. Thankfully, if we wait a few years, Raw 2000, they bring it back, just like Mae Young's Hand Baby.
Jeez.
Mark Henry's Sexy Chocolate Hand Baby, which showed up on Raw, like a random episode of Raw, if not Raw 1000.
I was just thinking
it just made like a cameo appearance. Hello, I'm all grown up now. So maybe one day we will find out what's in the box, but until then, sod all. The other one I was going to mention as well, it's quite a big one. You've probably got it on your list as well. You can probably read my mind. It has to be the whole Raw GM malarkey. I know we talked about GMs the other week. It was revealed Hornswoggle was the anonymous Raw GM who, whilst he couldn't speak any sort of language apart from leprechaun...
Growling, I think.
And whilst he was Vince McMahon's...
Offensive to everyone.
Whilst he was Vince McMahon's and Finley's illegitimate bastard son.
Another one of these angles, by the way.
Yeah, he did have the power to use a computer, so he could clearly operate it well enough to send email messages over a PA system.
This is the thing that when you delve into the world of internet and wrestling smarks, you come up with some, like, obviously well known for nitpicking, but you come up sometimes with some brilliant ones of like, this particular one is a case of like, surely we should have been able to work out Hornswoggle was the anonymous GM earlier because he's the only one with any fucking Wi-Fi in every arena they get to.
Yeah, he's got it all. He's plugged into the Matrix. Yeah. He knows what's going on. Yeah. Hornswoggle and his dongle. Anyway, so I researched who debuted the same year it was revealed Hornswoggle was the GM. So, a little bit of a list here. We have Big E, which... a big brute working behind a computer screen. We've seen the Lance of the Big Show attempt to use a computer, and Shawn Michaels when he's taking the piss, and all wrestlers pretend like they can't use a computer, and I'd imagine Big E falls into that category. Whilst he sends lots of tweets, it's alright, he's doing it on his phone, not on a real computer. You had all of the Shield. Now, you could have cut out 6 months of the early Shield by having someone like Seth Rollins, who eventually worked for the Authority, actually having that role, because at the same time you already had the Authority going along whilst the anonymous Raw GM was going on. So you could have cut out a few months, not had the Shield ever being a faction, or had them all heels from the get-go and had the Shield as the GM. Don't know if it would have worked, convoluted, but you could have certainly seen Seth Rollins in that role.
It works in a sense of they were concerned with this whole idea of justice, and at least to begin with, I know they throw it around every now and then. Also, as well, the whole GM having the power and like trying to settle things, that would have worked.
Or the biggest one, which I think would have been the most realistic option, Mr. Beardo himself, the saviour of the masses, the genius, Damien Sandow. I think that would have worked. I think they dropped the ball with poor old Sandow, unfortunately, hence the reason he left and went to TNA. But he was a man that was, well, portrayed of having great intellect, could clearly string a sentence together better than I can. And so why would you not have like an intelligent or an intellectual, as he called himself, actually playing that role? He was a heel anyway until he got over when he was a face with, well, he was still a heel, wasn't he, when he was the Miz's stunt double, which became a facey sort of tweener, hilarious.
It just got over with the crowd,
yeah.
in a very face way.
And then it got pissed on. But Damien Sandow could have easily been the anonymous GM. You've got a new character. Anyone could have been the anonymous GM, because all it was a platform to introduce a new character, get him over in a big way. Sandow had the ability to wrestle. It's not like he was green, was he, when he went in?
I think it's funny you mentioned this idea of like, oh, you want to put a debuting or new star in that role. I think for all these sort of setups, be they on TV or in wrestling, it's easier and perhaps sometimes more impactful to have an established character so that you can then, and I don't think people would do this in wrestling because wrestling is sort of hard to catch up with as it is, but then when you go back and you look at all the clues, and obviously that requires so much fucking nuance with the idea of like, if it's going to be as a random aside like Shawn Michaels all along, you could throw in little hints here and there and little whatever. I'm sure they actually did try to tease that it was a certain few people here and there, but I think the thing that they fall down in the trap of is, and they've done this a couple of times, and I mentioned the angle in passing, you're saying Hornswoggle as the anonymous GM, Hornswoggle as Vince's son as well.
Yeah, easily. It was, what's the point of it?
Basically, when they come down to an angle that they don't have someone for,
It's Lost booking, that's what it is. It's the same as Lost. They never knew what the end of it was going to be, or at least that was the rumour, wasn't it? They were writing it as they were filming it. They didn't know how it was going to actually end when they had to wrap it up. That's how it was, and that's why Lost went off the rails.
I think
Same
that can
reason
work
wrestling
in the
did.
sense of when you write characters in any sort of story, you will then eventually get to know the characters, and then you will eventually know what the characters will do before they've done it. So the ending will then become apparent because you'll go, okay, this person will do this, this person will do this, this person will do this. It will lead to this, so we can then tie it all off there. Problem with WWE is that's really hard to do on a week-by-week basis because you've got to think so far in advance and so far in the present. It's not impossible.
No, it's
just
not,
harder.
it's not impossible. Vince Russo was a prime example of it. Vince Russo did a good job when he was booking things. Until it all went off the rails,
Yeah.
alright? But he gave everyone a storyline, he seemed to have a general direction for people at least, and he gave them a reason to be fighting. I think the problem is with current Raw and SmackDown is, and it's coming back to the whole cliffhanger, and whilst this episode is about cliffhangers and general mysteries, the biggest mystery of all is, why are these people wrestling in the first place?
Yeah.
And why are we watching this shit? That's the biggest mystery. No, why are these people wrestling when they're basically just sent out to go and do the job? Two random jobbers, basically, or two people that are in a storyline that's rinse and repeat for 3 months.
There's a lot to go on there, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because you just brought up Vince Russo, to WCW Greatest Hits angles, the WCW Hummer angle, which is just amazing. I didn't watch this, I've read this through about 4 times and I still can't quite get my head around it. Kevin Nash and Randy Savage were feuding. The Macho Man was trying to get like some sort of revenge. Nash got into a limo and then the limo was like hit by a Hummer.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Basically, they, instead of Savage being charged for murder, they had a match the week later. Like,
Of course,
yeah,
why not?
Yeah. Sid got involved for reasons that weren't quite necessarily explained. They tried to make out that Sid was the guy that actually drove the Hummer. He wasn't. Yeah.
Right.
That went on for a good couple of months because this is WCW. There was a pay-per-view match where Savage said, "I'm gonna reveal who the driver was."
Was it Rikishi? I did it for the Rock.
Yeah. And also there was a tag team match with WCW title was on the line. Again, this is classic WCW.
Yeah.
Savage won the title and then decided not to reveal who the driver was. Hulk Hogan.
Champion's prerogative.
Yeah. Hulk Hogan showed up the very next night and beat for the title, and nothing happened with that regard. Nash then turned heel, even though he's the victim of all this. Dennis Rodman got involved.
Why not? He's friends with Hulk Hogan.
Nash lost the retirement match against Savage, quit the company. So that's it now. The Hummer angle's dead because the guy who was in the car is now left. No, it's not dead because Lex Luger turned up to start a fight with Hogan and said that he was the guy that was driving it.
Right. So now he's the one that's being charged for attempted murder.
No, so Luger's not being charged with anything. He's just chatting shit at this point.
Right. Okay. So Right. Okay.
So even though the guy who was in the car is gone,
yes,
they're still talking about it. It's still a main event angle because Lex Luger's chatting shit. Sting came out and said that he thought Hogan was involved, and then Sting kind of turned heel with the thing where they revealed Sting was in a Hummer, but it was a different coloured one, so could it be Sting, could it not? And then Vince Russo was in there. Basically, I say to cut a long story short, but that's a hell of a lot of convoluted bullshit.
You can't cut that short.
Yeah. A year later, Billy Kidman and Eric Bischoff attacked Hogan with a Hummer, and they heavily implied that Bischoff was the original driver, even though there was no reason for him to attack Kevin Nash. Seeing as he helped Kevin Nash win the title before that, I don't believe this, but I have to say it just for sheer bullshittery. But I still have to say this. The driver was actually planned to be Carmen Electra.
Why?
Yeah, no idea.
Well, that's just a general question. Just why?
Yeah.
Oh man, have you ever eaten a sandwich? Not a sandwich, like an ice cream sandwich, a choc ice, if you will, a bit too quickly and got a little bit of brain freeze? Yeah. That's how my brain feels after eating that shit, I'll tell you.
That's
who booked that? Who booked that? Who was the writer behind that?
Vince Russo.
Exactly. Another classic Russo storyline. What did I say? Every wrestler has a storyline. Fucking just throw them in there.
They were all in the car. There were 14 steering wheels.
Yeah, man. It'll be like a clown car when they all step out. All 14 of them just rammed into one little car.
Definitely clowns involved. The other one I want to mention is the Stacy Keibler being pregnant angle, which I'm not going to go into as much detail as I've just gone into with that because it's slightly less confusing. It's just the fact of she was pregnant and who was the father? Who was one of them? I don't even remember how it ended, but I do remember one of the greatest all-time segments of WCW Nitro, where Jeff Jarrett cut a 20-minute promo where he described in great detail how he seduced Stacy Keibler, and he brought David Flair out on stage. And then at the end of 20 minutes of talking, he just went, "Nah, I made it all up," and then beat him over the head with it.
That's it. That's all we need to know. Yeah,
absolutely great. So you've got the mystery.
Some time.
you've got the mystery. You've got the mystery solved, and then you've got another mystery of why the fuck would you do that?
At least the single mother went and landed on her feet, I guess.
Indeed.
Shacked up with George Clooney.
Yes,
Jarrett's selling knockoff gold and as an alcoholic. And where the fuck is David Flair?
Raising that kid?
Yeah, oh yeah, I guess so.
Probably.
Hooray!
I just want to mention actually, because there's only one, there should be more, but there's only one TNA one that I could find in terms of all this. It's when Samoa Joe got abducted by the ninjas.
What's that?
When he came back as the Nation of Violence, do you remember all that?
Oh, where he's got that shitty tattoo across his face.
And then beforehand, he was just abducted by some, what can only be described as ninjas. Because I like saying the word ninjas.
Ninjas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so another one that comes to mind, just a quick one. Corey Graves, when he had a bit more of an on-screen presence, yes, we hear his voice every single week on Raw and SmackDown and every single pay-per-view because he's pulling triple duty, it would seem. But Corey Graves was getting text messages regarding the relationship between Mr. Kurt Angle and his son.
There's a lot of illegitimate children going around in the world of wrestling.
Jason Jordan. That was a question that was never revealed. Who the bloody hell was the inside informant to Corey Graves? We shall never know, and we shall never really care, to be honest. At least it came out, and it bettered the career of all parties involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Corey Graves got more airtime by talking. Kurt Angle went on to wear a big gold suit and be known as Conquistador and win battle royales.
And then dress as Bray Wyatt backstage.
Yeah, and poor old Jason Jordan has sort of just disappeared with injuries, hasn't he? I don't know if he made a return. When was the last time he wrestled? Royal Rumble, maybe?
Possibly.
I think so. That's when him and Seth Rollins dropped the belts to the bar. Yeah.
It's a shame actually because there was a roundabout way of Jason Jordan was on the way of becoming one of these really good organic heels.
Yeah.
And him and Kurt Angle, which I don't know if they could have done it at WrestleMania, would have been good.
Has Jason Jordan got the pedigree to actually... Maybe pedigree's not the right word. Pedigree! But the fact that he would be doing a match that early in his career, I guess Kurt Angle would have carried him. I guess Kurt Angle a few years ago would have carried Jason Jordan at a WrestleMania sort of higher mid-card match. The spectacle would have been Kurt Angle actually having a singles match And it's obviously good for Jason Jordan because it's WrestleMania.
I don't know whether it's the Jason Jordan injury or whether it's the fact that Kurt Angle couldn't do a singles match that is the reason why we didn't quite get there. Well, obviously he wasn't fit, but I just wonder whether they'd have gone in that direction anyway.
I don't know if it would, because I think Jason Jordan eventually got the wrong sort of heat. He got X-Pac heat, didn't he? Where it was sort of boo, go away, we're actually sick of you, you're boring.
No, I actually liked the way it was going in the sense of like his character had a
it was a shithole, wasn't he? He basically stitched up Seth Rollins.
It was a logical progression of a guy that suddenly now you're in this position, Kurt Angle's your quote-unquote dad, and he's in a position of power within the company. He became an entitled asshole, which is kind of what people would do.
Oh, for all you boxing fans out there, the Chris Eubank Jr. syndrome. The most overrated boxer of all time, because his daddy's Chris Eubank Sr., who was a half-decent wrestler at the scene.
Wrestler,
yeah. The other sport. Yeah. Who was a...
Could cut a good promo with his lisp.
Yeah. Was a half-decent boxer.
I'm not even... He could actually cut good promos, yeah.
All boxers can do that. That's half their job, and boxers give promos to build hype for their matches. Yeah, but the more people watch, the more money they get paid.
Not all of them wear monocles and do that sort of jazz.
He wasn't doing that when he was a boxer on the south coast. Yeah, living in Brighton, driving around in a bloody Hummer on them little roads.
So I'm talking about
Chris Eubank, yeah.
Maybe it was Chris Eubank that was driving it the whole time.
And then the next one I was going to mention, the next and final one from my list, is who blew up Vince McMahon's limo. Remember when he died? When he legitimately died?
Yes, when
and Donald Trump even believed it. Get on the phone quick, send my condolences.
I could just imagine him watching that and going, oh my God, he dead. The weird thing about that is, it's actually executed really well in terms of, you've got Vince being an asshole through the whole... just through being Vince. And then as he's walking back to the limo, you see like the whole roster, including Paul London, laughing.
Smiling away, yeah.
Hi! And then he gets into the limo, and the way you've set it up is like every single person on this roster would have a reason to do that or to set that up. And so it could be anyone. And then I think, and I know this angle was called off after 1 week because of a certain tragedy in real life in wrestling. I think the answer we were actually given is the answer we would have ended up getting anyway. Given that, I'd rather have got to it quicker, which was that like Vince faked it himself just to see how much his family and everyone loved him.
Oh really? Do you reckon that's how the storyline would have gone then?
I think
like
so.
The following week on Raw they would have had like a sort of tribute night. Because I always heard, and this is probably bullshit anyway, but I always heard it was a way of him... They would have eventually revealed, obviously it's not him, but it was a way for him to step down and sort of move away from the company anyway. Not hand over the torch or any sort of power actually to any certain individuals. Triple H, the McMahon children, Linda McMahon, if she wanted to fill that role.
He's got to go back and protect the lockbox.
Yeah, but I always heard that it was a way of him just getting away from telly. Everyone knew it was bullshit and it was kayfabe, but it was his excuse. But yeah, I've never thought of it that way in terms of the following week would have been tribute night, and then they would have had the sort of, in a roundabout way, those sort of talking head sections with people giving like their opinion on Vince McMahon. But yeah, that would have been, unfortunately they had to do it for real reasons.
Yeah. The annoying thing about the Vince angle, or the sort of gap of logic in the Vince angle, and any of these sort of who-done-it angles, is that you have to then put someone in the role of detective, because there's not an obvious one. If you have a TV show, or if you have a show, there might be one in there already, but you could introduce a guy and they come in and do the investigation.
I'm already thinking of one.
Constable Corby.
Yeah, man.
Fuck off.
He's already got the title.
Yeah. Only if he wears like the bobby hat and dresses up as like an old school English policeman, yeah.
Getting behind a computer screen.
Yeah. So if you try and progress the storyline as you're trying to progress it, I don't see who your character is or person is that's going to advance that on a week by week basis, because Vince is gone, and then what you'd have to do is, the problem because everyone hates him anyway, and you set that up as a sort of tool to make everyone a suspect, no one would then bother investigating it. No one would be sat there going, maybe Stephanie McMahon would be there going, oh, I think there's foul play here or something, so who's done this? And even then you'd be like, the whole roster would be like, we don't care. We hated the guy.
Yeah, no one gives a shit anyway. Yeah.
And you're, as a crowd and as an audience, not necessarily, given everything we've seen, going to get behind the Stephanie McMahon show as she tries to solve this crime. I mean, it is the Stephanie McMahon show anyway.
No, I could see filling that role of actually being like the on-screen detective.
Go on.
Mirrors.
I thought you
Can't you
say
just
that,
see
actually.
him picturing that? Like, the problem is, it would become a sort of, you'd want him to stay serious, and it would almost seem like a sort of comedy role for him.
It's funny because he's done it before. He ran over Steve Austin.
Oh yeah, he was doing that, wasn't he? He was going around pointing the finger at people.
This is a big angle that was, in the height of wrestling, worked really well to get Steve Austin off TV.
Yeah.
Created such intrigue when he came back. I remember this was like the biggest deal ever. And I think this has kind of been rewritten as time has gone on. When Rikishi was revealed to be the guy, no one was that arsed, no one was that bothered, no one was like, oh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It was the way it was written after that, of like The Rock taking the piss out of him, and then within like, what, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, probably longer than that, where it was like, no, yeah, it was Rikishi, but Triple H was the mastermind and all that.
Behind it anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd imagine the angle always was for Triple H to be the mastermind behind it. I think what it was a bloody good platform for Rikishi to get himself away from the whole too cool and pissing about.
This is what you were talking about earlier in terms of new character or adding a new dimension to an old character.
Yeah, it certainly worked for Rikishi. I think the wheels fell off rather quickly. I remember this quite vividly because this is when it was probably the peak of my interest, or at least enthusiasm, to wrestling. This is around 2000, 2001, when it was revealed and they had a match at, I think, The Rock versus Rikishi at Survivor Series.
Yeah.
Obviously, The Rock came out on top, but the fact that Rikishi absolutely destroyed him with like 4 or 5 bonsai drops at the end of it, and The Rock's all bloody and coughing up blood at the end of the match, and I think it was good for Rikishi. The problem is the wheels fell off a bit too quickly because it was only at the following year's Royal Rumble that Meng showed up again, and so they went on to be like this sort of hybrid head shrinkers. It's going back to that old school way of looking at wrestlers where, because they're from the islands, they're obviously like savages and cannibals, and so stick the two slightly brown Samoan men together and have them garbling at each other rather than talking, and putting them in first blood matches with Kane and The Undertaker and all that sort of shit. And unfortunately, however much it pains me to say about poor old Meng, it's like Haku/Meng sort of took a bit of the glory and spotlight away from what Rikishi could have actually been.
I like the idea, by the way, that they went into the studios, Jim Johnson sat down and went, we need to establish that Rikishi isn't a good person anymore. Is there any way we could subtly imply that he's not a good man anymore? All jokes aside, that angle was sort of, well, I want to say it had his balls cut off, but that's definitely a man's job, not Triple H's. In terms of the list of the ones I've got left, one that gets sort of lost in time because we're never going to know the answer. I don't know if they had an answer, and sometimes they plant these seeds and don't ever follow up on them. Do you remember when Nexus buried The Undertaker alive? And Wade Barrett was, it's part of the bigger plan, and there was no more in terms of clues as to that.
I would have watched it.
Yeah.
Did it end the show by any chance?
It was Kane and The Undertaker who buried the live match. I think it was Survivor Series around that sort of time.
Oh, another Kane versus Undertaker match. Oh.
Getting the shivers.
Yeah, man.
Getting the shivers.
I do remember the Nexus interfering, or at least running out. Not all of the Nexus though. From what I can remember, and my memory is rather clouded on this matter, for obvious reasons, it was Wade Barrett. There was, I'm sure Heath Slater was knocking about it.
Well, there were one member down anyway, because someone got fired for like tying someone.
What was the one that used to do all the flippy shit from South Africa called?
Justin Gabriel.
Justin Gabriel was there as well. That's what I can remember from it, and pretty much just Wade Barrett standing over it once the dump truck had dumped its load. Once it had blown its load all over The Undertaker, around the mouth, over the face, and all over the body.
You're watching something different.
Oh,
Technically you are describing what happened, but still, your recollection of it is eroticised, shall we say.
Rather murky viewing.
Yeah, that one.
So what was the bigger picture? What was the bigger plan?
They never even said.
There was no bigger plan. What was it? Kill John Cena?
I think maybe they were trying to build up to some sort of Wade Barrett Undertaker WrestleMania match. when you forget how big Wade Barrett was at this particular point in time.
How do you mean?
Nexus was
What,
a big
super
deal.
over? Yeah. Big enough to go over the Undertaker?
No, he could have fought him
Could
and
you
lost.
realistically seen Wade Barrett actually going over the Undertaker at WrestleMania? Could he have been the one?
No, he couldn't.
What year would this have been as well?
This would have been before, well before.
Yeah,
Street was broken.
yeah.
But what I mean is that like, if you want to talk in terms of intrigue and in terms of selling a match, you could easily have Wade Barrett versus The Undertaker, and you know Wade Barrett's got like 6 other lads, and you're like, how the fuck is he going to get out of this? Because it's like, so the quote-unquote numbers game is too much, and then you find a way to book the match so that like, effectively The Undertaker would beat 6 men, but still, it's no worse than what they did in the end.
Yeah, that's just an equal burial to what Cena did to him anyway.
Yeah. So there is that. There's CM Punk and Kevin Nash coming out of the crowd, and then it was explained by someone texted me to tell me to come out, and then it was revealed that I think Kevin Nash texted himself, I think, or he just lied.
I don't know, this is just me being me about Kevin Nash though, and basically everything I think about Kevin Nash, which is a bit of a knob.
I've got a slightly more recent one for you here, and this has been resolved. Alistair Black.
Oh yeah, who done it?
Yeah.
Who knows? Nikki Cross knows.
Yes.
It's good. They don't do that often. They don't do this sort of storyline often on NXT.
No.
On NXT, it's more bitter rivalries. So another immediate one would be Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa.
Well, Hideo Itami was attacked, and I don't think it was
He got attacked, in the parking lot. Never revealed who it was. But it always seems, for a lot of NXT, especially, well, not really in the early days either, let's say a few years back, you had Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, these sort of feuds which are based on friendship. You had Sasha Banks and Bayley when they had their Iron Man match, which was, that wasn't a bit of a feud, it was more of a sort of competitive feud.
Yeah.
But there were elements of that bitterness in there. So not getting too far away from your point, but it's the fact that they don't typically do this more long-winded whodunit story.
Yeah, they have a very basic sort of A plus B, and this is introducing C's and questions.
Yeah, but I think, again, that's for the fans that are actually watching it, though. NXT is the platform for, like, seeing the competitive style of wrestling, whereas, whilst you say SmackDown is the wrestling show and Raw's the storyline one, there is the crossover to some extent, obviously, and SmackDown does have storylines. AJ Styles and Samoa Joe, where they've gone back to that Attitude Era, or maybe pre-Attitude Era of Brian Pillman and Steve Austin, where he's showing up at houses and doing all that sort of, how's your wife, I'm the boogeyman, I'm coming to get you, all that sort of bollocks.
That's the thing we talked about earlier in terms of, it's the closed loop. It's if you're watching it for the first time, you can kind of gather what's been going on just by that one segment, or one sort of video package, as it were.
So do casual fans watch NXT then?
I don't know. I think as I say, I think this kind of storyline, you had layer, you had depth. As long as the reveal and the payoff is good. Some of the angles we spoke about, aside from the Hummer angle, work really well in terms of creating some sort of like, for the fans to like try and work out who did it. And the only problem is that like when you do this in TV, you try and throw in little clues here and there. When they do it in wrestling, they tend to just throw no clues in there and then make it Hornswoggle at the end of it. Yeah.
Anyone. It's the equivalent of dipping your hand into a big bowl of balls. It's the FA Cup draw, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just pull a name out.
And Hornswoggle's every name.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting one for you before we wrap this up, because there are a couple that I want to mention. The Undertaker's wife stalker.
Oh, it's me as DDP.
Yeah.
The power of positive thinking.
Yes.
Yeah, what a guy.
There was a period of time where I remember we literally just said about this in terms of like get the fans guessing as to who it was. I remember there were people like getting that audio and trying to do whatever you could do with that audio back in like 2001. And like they were going, it's Vince McMahon's voice, I've done it, I've put it into a thing and I've recoded it and done this, and it's Vince McMahon's voice, so it's Vince McMahon, he's the stalker.
Yeah, no, legit fun factoid, because I don't know if this is complete bollocks, but I do believe there's an element of truth in it. Vince McMahon did actually do the recordings for the voice, and you can imagine him sitting in his dirty, sweaty room, like, oh Sarah, come to Pappy. you can imagine doing it.
Can't help himself.
Warp the voice, that'll do. Send it out, put it over a video package, or I'll get out there in a bush film with her around the pool.
Undertaker said, what are you doing, Vince? He's like, no, this is for an angle, damn it. Give me that thing Cher's got.
Oh, man.
He had auto-tune once, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm all over that." But
yeah, that was a shame of that storyline. It just wasn't right for DDP.
That's what I'm saying. It's the reveal. The reveal is the key to it, really.
I'm sort of backtracking on my earlier point, though. For DDP, it's slightly different because he's already this hurts to say, a star in inverted brackets, rabbit ears.
People knew who he was, basically.
People knew who he was, but the fact that he's also known as backstage, whilst the internet wasn't as big as it was in the 2000s when this was obviously all going round during the invasion angle, he was known as a bit of a nice guy. It just seems out of character, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To pick DDP as all the people, he doesn't particularly, like, his look isn't particularly lecherous. You don't see a sort of pervy man when you look at him. Maybe back in the olden days when he had that bloody great big perm mulleted looking thing. But
it's a weird one because you're so blinded to the fact that he is a WCW star and therefore a worldly recognised name, and you're literally going to go, we're going to introduce him as this guy. Our audience, who don't know him from before, they're going to have to believe him as this guy. I didn't really do a lot other than just go, yeah, he's a guy. Yeah, that's it.
But then it was instant burial anyway, which is still putting over the WWE guy, which unfortunately, for a lesser name in WWE that also had an equally attractive wife, if you'd put DDP against a mid-carder that had a decent looking wife, that you give her a bit of screen time so that she's now a recognisable face, I think it would have worked for DDP. The fact that it was against The Undertaker, who's well known as only a WWE guy, it's just not going to work. You're always going to put over The Undertaker over a character like DDP. When did DDP get a win over The Undertaker? He didn't. They had a singles match. DDP then got with Kane in that sort of Jersey triad minus Bam Bam Bigelow. I don't know if they ever had a name for their little tag team, but they had a cage match against Kane and The Undertaker where basically Kane and The Undertaker destroyed them. They maybe had another singles match. I know Canyon certainly had a match against Kane because it's obviously the spin-off partisan booking in it where you just basically try and throw everyone in there. Everyone, one gets a win one week, the other week. But after that, he disappears for a few weeks, shows up in a bloody battle royale a few months later and just thrown out. And that's the end of DDP.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's nothing else for it.
Well, you say DDP, it's WWEDP.
The lesser known version.
Yeah.
When in reality, really nice man actually. One day I'll meet him down in Mexico.
We have met him.
Yeah, he gave me the invite though, didn't he, to fly out? If you're in the area, I'm filming. Oh, great, thanks.
Right, we're getting on to the absolute hardcore of this, and I resisted to use one specific word because when you're toward the tail end of something, you're toward the higher end of something, and the higher power is one of these angles where who is the higher power? And it's the classic Vince gif of he had the black sort of mask on and then pulls it off.
The robe.
It was me all along.
Yeah.
And he's not talking about in the bushes with Sarah.
It's strange, when I was researching for this episode, that didn't even cross my mind. That whole storyline, I never even thought about it. Strange why he'd crucify his own daughter. He obviously had reasons for it, but... Yeah.
She wasn't as fit as Sarah, apparently.
No, apparently not.
And if you look at Vince's history with what he's, certain angles he's wanted to put Stephanie McMahon in, that actually makes certain sense.
Oh, we're going to talk about another mystery of Stephanie McMahon?
No.
What's this
no,
idea about Macho Man, eh?
No. That's a fairly straightforward one in the sense of, like, there are certain angles where...
She was 14 years old. Go at it.
Yeah, that's definitely getting good. It's funny because literally from the DDP angle, we're talking about this whole idea of, like, it doesn't make sense to be him because he's such a nice guy and all that. But with Vince, it's like, whenever you reveal it's Vince, it makes sense. I don't know what it is about his character, I don't know what it is about him as an entity in wrestling, but for all the loopholes that you go along that and go, hang on, that doesn't, did you really, like you said about Stephanie and that, it's like, really? And then you go, actually, yeah, you kind of, yeah, I'm fine with that. And for any sort of proper ultimate villain, he is the final boss of wrestling in that sort of sense, and for him to reveal himself as that, it works really well.
It's the old adage of the booker putting himself over. Yeah, that's essentially what he's doing. He's booking himself into the highest position. And why not? Because who's going to give you a bollocking when it all goes tits up? No one is, because there's no one above you.
He's there in the mirror going, "God damn it!
Oh, damn it, you fucked it up again."
And then, I know we're doing impressions, but the final one of this, Could leave you on a cliffhanger and just leave it here, but
We'll reveal it next week instead. We did the last one.
tried to do a cliffhanger there, but just sort of like...
You can't do it.
No, you can't.
You're no Sylvester Stallone.
No.
Hey, Cliffhanger.
That's a good film.
It is a brilliant film.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say brilliant, actually. I'm going to take that back. I'm going to say...
I want to put it back.
It's decent.
It's on the table.
You know what is good? Dan Fairbrass, who was in that, who played #1 henchman, big bloke, English, brown hair. He was also in EastEnders for a period.
Oh, I remember, yeah.
So then when you watch Cliffhanger and you go, oh, that's him from EastEnders, there you go.
It's the one angle, cliffhanger, mystery that spiraled into a complete explosion of pro wrestling amazingness. Who's the third man?
Who is it? I still don't know.
It might have been Hulk Hogan.
Ah, spoiler alert, you bastard. All right.
Was it
Bobby
Bobby
Heenan?
Heenan?
Yeah.
It's an interesting sort of story how we get to this in the first instance. If you read Eric Bischoff's book, it's Hogan wanted nothing to do with that, and Bischoff asked him initially.
And then Hogan realised there's a bit of traction behind the NWO and thinking, oi oi, ka-ching, the old dollar signs appear in his eyes. Yeah.
But this is what I said to you before about, and we've mentioned this a few times during the podcast, because we're planting seeds for the end. We are that good, yes, we are that good. In terms of, it's a character, but like, it's changed everything we know about that guy, and yet it still almost kind of makes sense. Because at the time, Hogan was being booed for a good solid year in WCW as the red and yellow. And then also as well, Hogan, right, no matter how you want to sugarcoat it, and it goes back to his current relationship with the company now. He's a WWF guy down to a T. Like, he is one of the, well, he had his spot on the Mount Rushmore. I'm not sure if it's still there with everything that's happened, but he had his spot.
Yeah.
And so, realistically speaking, he should be WCW's ultimate bad guy. So then when WCW actually pulled the trigger on this and did it, it made perfect sense. It was done in a way that, Bobby Heenan aside, no one saw coming. And even with that, this is the beauty of Hogan being the third man, is that when that happened, no one twigged. No one was like, oh shit, that was spoiled. That was on broadcast TV. It's like, oh, he botched the finish because we already knew it would be Hogan. Ironically enough, that being that Hogan actually botched the promo.
Did he?
Yeah, he said, the New World Organization, brother.
Oh, you fool.
Yeah.
You had one job.
Yeah.
You fool. Yeah, I think it certainly gave his career a kick up the arse anyway. When you've played this sort of all-American hero for your entire career and you're starting to get booed, you need something big.
It's the reason why we think John Cena heel turn would have solved everything, because it did it for Hogan.
So, what are we saying? Vince McMahon's stubborn? Is that all? Well, the biggest mystery of all, Vince McMahon. He's stubborn, revealed.
I think the industry's changed.
Yeah.
I think and you sort of saw it during the course of that NWO run, as bloated as it got. They were at the start, and one of the reasons why that worked is, and you can see it from the exact moment in that pay-per-view, with like the trash being thrown into the ring and all that, they were hated. But how long did it take them to get cool? Like,
Not long at all.
yeah, not long at all. In what, 98?
Yeah.
So if you did that sort of thing now, if John Cena did that sort of heel turn now, within a week they'd be like the biggest face in the company.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
So it backfire spectacularly if you tried it now.
You're falling into that sort of CM Punk territory, aren't you, where you're sort of tweener, you're supposed to be the heel, you're still getting cheered because of all the smarts and people knowing what they know about the industry, even though Triple H would say, fuck all about it. Yeah, obviously, you turn someone heel that's been a face the entire time, it's the revitalisation that they need in their career.
I think with the difference between Hogan and Cena at this particular point in time is it fit really well in terms of you've got an asset at the time in that era like Hulk Hogan, and you can't use him because the crowd is shitting all over him.
Yeah.
And you throw him in with Hall and Nash. Not only does it legitimise the NWO as a thing, because you've got Hall and Nash who are two of the biggest stars of that sort of era anyway. You've got Hogan, who's the biggest star of the previous era. As a stable, that's like you're stacking the deck, so to speak. When people are tuning in to Nitro week after week during this run where they continue to beat the Raw ratings, it's what are the NWO going to do? Although when they fucking destroyed the set for half an hour straight, that weren't great.
No.
And B, who can possibly fight these guys because they're so strong?
Who else? You obviously know more about WCW than I do anyway, or at least that time period. So, who else was the prospective third man?
Sting. If it wasn't going to be Hogan, it was going to be Sting.
Was it?
Which is the same sort of deal.
Is there anyone else that could have filled that role then? If it wasn't Sting, it is the same sort of deal for Sting. I think obviously it works better for Hogan being there. It's difficult to say in WCW, but you'd argue that Hogan was still the bigger star anyway.
Yeah, I also think if it's Sting, Sting's a face again within maybe 6 months and he's fighting the NWO.
Yeah.
You get the same storyline that Sting ended up with, except probably not the screwy finish at Starrcade.
So is it just going to be another person that eventually joined the NWO anyway, which is basically the entire WCW roster, apart from Chris Jericho and Billy Kidman?
Yeah, well, this is the thing with that particular role. If it's not a star, then, as I mentioned before, the stable itself doesn't look as legit. And if it's not someone the crowd can connect with, then it just seems an anticlimax.
Yeah.
Like, imagine, like, you've got this big match built up, you've got Hall and Nash, and they're like, we're calling this guy out. We're going to have someone backing us up, and it's Billy Kidman. And you're like, yeah. No, all due respect to Billy Kidman, I love him, and his fake DMX music when he was in SmackDown. But it wouldn't have had the same impact. It had to be Hogan and...
Already a massive star.
Sting would have worked, but it wouldn't have worked for as long as Hogan, and it would have had the same impact on the industry. And this is the whole point that we're trying to get to, in the sense of, like, you can have these angles and you can have these things and ways of doing storylines whereby, like, you watch the end of Raw and you go, I mean, I mentioned them before in terms of, like, the Nexus. When the Nexus formed, I remember sitting there after Raw had finished at 4 o'clock in the morning going, I need to know everything I can possibly know about what they're doing, this angle. I'm so hyped to watch Raw next week because what the fuck's going on? Who is this? What is this thing?
Yeah.
And that. It's a good way and it's a clever way of hooking viewers. The problems you've got is there's no real, like, as we said, resolution points. So when do you do this? I mean, we haven't mentioned this, but the Aces and Eights had that all over them. Like, every single month they had another revelation. And overall, I think it worked, but...
I don't know. I don't, you know, we need to wrap this up sooner or later. We've got homes to go to. But
Yeah.
Aces and Eights, was Doc Gallows that well known when he was a revelation of who these members are? When they're all taking their bloody balaclavas off?
I know, I think the when you take the Aces and Eights thing from front to back, it works really well. The only problem is that during that time you had all these sort of plot points and revelations that didn't quite work in the moment. But when you read it from front to back, it's like, actually, this was good. This was done well enough.
What was the big reveal? Was that one of the Dudleys?
Yeah, Devon and then Bubba Ray was the leader, and then all this.
And Taz was in there at one stage.
Yeah.
Taz was quite a prominent member from the start, though, wasn't he? From what I recall, because he was taking up the whole heel commentator role anyway.
Yeah. All I'll say is this: it's a way of getting eyes and a way of, you think, keeping them, but the problem is you have to be clever about it, and you have to sort of, it's the right person fitting that role at the right time. We talk so often about swerving for swerving's sake, this idea of someone just talents for no particular reason. If you do this well, you can execute stuff that will keep storylines going for a long time and keep viewers interested. If you do it wrongly, you can have a storyline going for a year where it turns out to become an Electra.
So I guess what we're saying then, ultimately, as we wrap this bastard up, Hornswoggle was the right man at the right time.
Hornswoggle.
To be the Raw GM.
The big swerve that we've finally got after all this mystery is that the biggest guy is Hornswoggle.
He was the right guy in the wrong place at the right time in the wrong place.
This has been Beyond the Beermat. Thank you for listening. Follow us on @TheBeermat on Twitter. Go to facebook.com/TheBeermat, and also give us all the love in the world on iTunes, because we give you the love and we give you an amazing podcast. So, you know, you have to give us something in return.
Yeah, it's free, you bastard. Peace.
Thank you for listening. See you soon.